We're here with a 1995 Mercedes 210 model. This is a pretty sweet ride. The interior is excellent condition. This car has been taken care of very well. The owner is a lady who lives with her sister. She's in her elderly years and she loves this car. And look at it. It's almost like new. You got nice interior, very nice leather here. You got leather seats, beautiful back area, nice to put my tools when I'm working, and very spacious. I love this car. It's a 1995. It has an interesting backstory. So this lady started having issues with her spark plugs. I'm at a garage. Now, I usually do not work in garages, but this is an uptown garage in Westlands, so it's a very safe spot and I don't have an issue here. And the owner is pretty decent. And those are the kind of people I love working with. So let me give you the backstory of this car. This car came in to this garage after being fiddled with by so many people, and then she managed to stay with this guy for some time, but he doesn't know what the problem is. So it started misfiring. I don't know the history of that exactly, but she just said it started shaking and losing power. Then it was taken to several people. One of them was a Mercedes specialist. Now when I hear that term specialist, it always comes with disaster. Always, 100% of the times. So it was taken to a Mercedes specialist and they told her she needed new plugs and coils. Inserted them, made no change. Went to another person who told her that her throttle body was messed up. They changed the throttle body, made no change. Went to a third person and a fourth person and a fifth person. Now in between those three people, they rewired the harness, they changed a couple of things. She spent over, I don't know, hundreds of thousands basically on this car. And this problem has been like this, not for days, not for weeks, not for months, but get this, years. So she decided to settle with the problem. She didn't want people fiddling with the car because every time she would get the car back, it would have minor damages here and there, and she didn't want that anymore. So the current garage, what he's told me is her spark plugs last for a very short time before getting completely fouled up, and they become totally black, and she loses power to a point where she can't drive. Comes back to the garage. So what he has elected to do is to clean the spark plugs every so often, put it back in the car, and then she drives again. And that's how she's been coping. But now it has become so bad and she wants it fixed. It's really gotten to her nerves to a point where she's almost giving up. I met this guy by chance and we hit it off very well. And we are not really in partnership, but I told him what I will do is I will come and diagnose cars, and as long as he can pay me my rate, I'm good to go. But of course I negotiated a special rate for him because it's going to be a B2B service and he's going to have multiple cars if I win over his heart. So this is my first diagnosis for this one. The first thing I've noticed is on this vehicle, it's a 95, so it has the OBD1 connector here. But the issue is when I hook up to this, I cannot communicate. And I'm not the only one. Apparently a lot of techs have come and have tried to communicate with this thing and they cannot communicate. So with no communication, you can understand why all this was done. So what I'm seeing here initially is these harnesses have been changed. Got silicone there, classic Kenyan ceiling style. Mass airflow has been changed. That has been changed. Wiring has been redone here. I think what they did was they chopped off the engine harness and put in a new one, and that hasn't solved anything. And that's where we are with this car. Very, very interesting situation. So I was here yesterday and I got frustrated with the data for this car. I couldn't find the data well. I was fighting the data a lot and it became ridiculous. I only did a few checks because I couldn't find the data. So I told him, let me go home and sort this data out and then come back and do the diagnosis. So I want to show you why I struggled with the data, and I also want to show you why I hate working with Mercedes cars. Again, not because of the cars. Cars are cars. It's because of how Mercedes have chosen to lay out their OEM data. It is a very, very bad system that they have. So let me show you what difficulty I had with this and where I am, and then we'll proceed. Here in WIS, we're going to identify our vehicle, put in the VIN. So this is our car. Has the 111 engine. Now keep that in mind. Just pull up the data card so you can see a few things. Engine number is 111.9. It's an E230, transmission 722.4. Now this has been running for a very, very long time. Kudos to Mercedes for having a long running transmission. I think what has made this reliable is because they haven't changed this in a long time, but what they've been doing is with every model they've been perfecting it. It's a wonderful, wonderful transmission to have. And if you look at here at the retrader, it is 95/10/31. So 31st/10/1995, that is when it was pushed out of the factory. Now as a 95, we don't have much designation. WIS doesn't date back that well for a lot of these items, so we only have a few codes. Our code list is not complete. For example, we have cruise control, but it's not listed here, but I'm sure it's under here where there's no designation. Anyway, no problem. So I'm looking for the wiring diagram. The first thing I do is to come to the table of contents, wiring diagrams, passenger cars. Normally the wiring diagrams for the engine, they are always listed in the fuel system, but here if we go in, we're all grayed out. Why? Because our model doesn't apply and our engine doesn't apply to any of these. So I got stuck here. I decided no big deal, let me go to Starfinder. I will go to Starfinder in a minute, but Starfinder did not have this information either. They didn't have the model. They had the model, but they did not have the engine. So my engine is 111 and the model is 210. Starfinder did not have an engine 111 in model 210. So I was stuck. So I decided to come here and peek around, and what I found is in the mixture information, we actually had the wiring diagram. So it has been misdesignated in WIS. That is why I couldn't find it. No problem. So now I have my wiring diagram. Very nice. I was interested in why I wasn't communicating. So I came here to my diagnostic connector, and it has a couple of wires, 2 powers coming here, and then a data line going to the ECU, which is here. I checked this data line. The data line is continuous. It's not shorted to ground. The diagnostic connector is communicating on this, but for some reason, it's not able to talk to the ECU. So I'm out of luck with that. The only thing I decided to do is to look for my oxygen sensor and then see, are we running too lean or are we running too rich? But in order to do that, I needed the connector for the ECU. So if you come here on the wiring diagram, there are two connectors. So if you go to the beginning here, you'll find connector number 2 and then connector number 1. In WIS, there is no connector image for this engine. I have looked all over, they don't have it. And remember, in Starfinder, we do not have this information. No big deal. So I decided to go to the engine ECU because everybody labels their engine ECU connectors, right? So here we are on the ECU. And so I come here and disconnect the ECU and check that out. We have completely no designations for these pins. There are no numbers, there are no labels, there's nothing. And the way the pins are oriented, they're not even consistent. So you see here we have missing. And this connector is like that. So there are two pins that are isolated on a different harness up here. So I needed to get this. When I try and do a physical count, nothing I do matches what's on the wiring diagram. So this is where I was stuck and I needed to go and think about this. So now let me show you how I managed to get around this. We're in Starfinder. We're going to go to our model 210. And we're going to go to Web ETM. Engine Fuel Management. Now this is what I was saying. Our engine is 111. We only have 119, 114, 112, and 606. We don't have 111. So what I did is go back, search for a diagram by component name or number. I know my ECU is N3/4. That's the designation. And just a tip, what I have noticed is when Mercedes uses the same module that has the same configuration of pins and all that, they use the same number for it. So if I search for this, I find it in HFM SFI sequential multiport fuel injection ignition for engine 104. Now I know that's not my engine, but at least this will allow me to see the engine control module connectors. So I come here to my N3 or 4. It keeps popping up, and I come here to my connectors, and this is my connector. Now the first thing I notice is this is completely populated. So what this tells me is even on mine, the ones that are spaces, they are still counted in this image. So that's what I have to take into account. Second thing is to find out where my pins really are. So I went to the wiring diagram now for this car and looked at one of the injectors, and I found that it was located on number 23. So when I went and I looked at 23 for connector number 2, it was actually on this side. So this connector, we are looking at it with the connector face facing you. So I have had to flip this over, so my 1 will come on this side and my 44 will come on this side. So what I know is this connector needs to flip horizontally for it to match my engine view connector number 2. No big deal. That's what I did. Next, connector number 1. I looked at this item here, and this is actually a can harness that has been pinned in here. And notice the reason why I could not count properly is because we're not even starting on 1, because these pins are being counted assuming this hole is populated. It's being counted exactly the same as this. So this connector is taking up the space of 1, 2, 3, 12, 13, and 14. That is why you have them missing here, but they're still being counted. This is crucial information that I needed. All I needed to do now was to flip this upwards, now vertically, so that this connector can be up here, because that is my designation for this when looking at it from the ECU side. So I took this, converted it to SVG, and then came to this. Now I am ready to do my diagnosis, because this is exactly how my connector is facing on the engine. Connector 1, connector 2. And my pins are like that. So 4 to 11 up to 44, 1 to 11 up to 44. Now that this is done, let's go back to the wiring diagram and let's see what we are going to test. Remember, we don't have live data, but we don't need live data. We can just look at the outputs of this module. The first thing I want to show you is what this car does when it is running. We're going to start it. So it starts up really okay, but it has a persistent misfire. So there you can see it's shaking pretty bad, really misfiring. And we go to the exhaust. It's on the other side. Misfire. And this thing reeks of gas. I don't know how to describe it, only that it is very pungent, the kind of smell that makes your eyes water. Very strong gas smell. So let's see what we have. It's also quite rough running. At this point, I want to start with the cam and crank correlation. I just want to make sure that this engine is in time, seeing as how many people have touched it. So cam and crank next. For my first capture, I want to take the cam and crank correlation, and I want to take ignition coil number 1 and ignition coil number 2. The ignition coils in this have a direct control from the ECU to the coil, and that will help me see the coil primary voltage, and it'll give me a good idea of what's happening in the cylinders. Hardly do we ever get to see that in modern cars, because they are controlled with a transistor in the coil itself. But this is good, we have that information. So what I want to do is come to B6 1, that is my camshaft position sensor, and we're going to probe here on pin 8, connector number 2, and the next is Z5, which is the actually L5, which is the crank sensor, and the signal wire is pin 30 on connector 2. And then we're going to go to our ignition coils. That is T1 1 and T1 2, and that is terminal 9 and terminal 21 respectively on connector number 2. Here we are ready. Let's start the scope. Start the car. And we'll just capture one screen. That's enough. Stop the scope. Put that off. That's all we need. So let me save this. So we're going to zoom in here. First thing to check is our cam and our crank. A good correlation. I will have to check this. I need to get a known good. But the second thing is our coil burn. Check this out. So this is coil 1, which is a waste spark system. If I go back to my wiring diagram here, coil number 1 is on cylinder 1 and 4. Coil number 2 is on cylinder 2 and 3. So if you come here, coil number 1 looks okay. So we have that. Coil number 2 looks suspicious. So we have this. And then coil number 1 again looks okay. And then the second one in coil number 2 is this. I don't like this burn right here. So let me zoom back in. And also this. Now when you see this, this means that this energy is going directly, almost directly to ground. So we have either a shorted plug wire or a shorted plug on one of these two, either cylinder 2 or cylinder number 3. It's hard to tell which is which unless you look here. Actually, it won't be too difficult to tell, because this after here should be TDC number 1. So this is TDC number 1. So this is 1, 3, 4, 2. So we have an issue in cylinder number 2 already at the plug or at the plug wire. If we have a plug wire, I don't know how this system works. So the first thing I want to do is to go to cylinder number 2 and remove that plug or plug wire and see what we have. Then second thing I want to do is jump on Rotkey and see if I can get a good cam and crank correlation for this engine. Let me do that quickly and then we will proceed. I'm looking for a good cam and crank correlation, and I'm logged into the Pico waveform library. I've noticed there are two types. There is the type with the fat crankshaft pulse. Then there's one with a thin crankshaft pulse. So ours is the one with a thin crankshaft pulse, and I'm out of luck here because the only two that are shown are uploaded here by this guy, dwarfy. But he says here this is at idle. Control timing is incorrect. And this is exactly the same waveform it just says here at idle. So if you open this one, that he says the control timing is incorrect. So open it in Picoscope 7. I do not like using Picoscope 7. I don't like the feel of the software. I don't like the flow. I only use it to access the waveform library. It's another whole learning curve which I am not willing to invest time in right now. I have too many things to do. So here we see that he says wrong control timing, and it drops on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. On the 5th tooth it drops and rises on the 2nd after the pulse, and his crankshaft is taken on the other wire. So that's one thing to note. This won't help me much because my capture is the crankshaft on this side, but the strange thing is mine is exactly the same as his. Remember, we are mirrored because he took his crankshaft on the negative side and I've taken it on the positive side. So if you come here, we go down on the 2nd and we raise up on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the 7th tooth. Let's go back to his. 2 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, not only is this different from mine, the pulse width is also different because my pulse width spans more teeth than this one. I can't use this. Now, I have another one from Rotke. One thing I don't like about Rotke is these useless graphics that they put here. I wish they would put this on the side, but neither here nor there for what we need. So these are zoomed in. We've got two pictures here, one zoomed out. So this one is more like mine because he has taken his on the positive side of the crankshaft sensor, and his pulse width looks exactly like mine, but again we have a different configuration where the teeth fall. So here we fall on the first tooth and we raise on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the 7th tooth. Go back to ours. We fall on the 2nd tooth and we raise on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th. Now my pulse width is longer. It's much longer. Let me look at the next one, see if it's the same. I want to see how many teeth mine span. It looks like mine span quite a number of teeth. So here we have 2 missing teeth. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. My pulse width spans 12 teeth, and his pulse width spans 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 teeth. I can't rely on any of these waveforms. This is inconclusive. I don't know whether my timing is good or bad. We're going to keep this at the back of our minds, but this is definitely a problem. Let me go now to this, and we calculated it to be number 2, I think, or number 3. Let's see. 1, 3, So this is 1, 3, 4, 2. So both 3 and 2, I don't like what's going on there. So let's go to cylinder 3 and 2 and physically look at these spark plugs. So I've just taken out, this is a spark plug for cylinder number 2, actually number 3, one of the ones that I wasn't liking the pattern. And check this out, this guy wasn't kidding when he said this thing is running really rich. And just like my nose can confirm, this tip is fouled up and it is full of raw fuel. But the plug itself looks in very good condition. I don't think that is our problem. So what I want to do is clean this up, but what we saw was a shorted plug or a shorted plug wire. So what I want to do is come here and take this plug wire out of coil number 2 and put it on coil number 1. So I'm going to swap those two around and then retake our capture. If our funky waveform moves to 1, then we know we have a bad plug wire. If our funky waveform remains there, then we know it is the plug. So I just want to do that real quick. There we have it. I had marked it before moving it. So this is coil number 2, but I've put plug wire number 1, and that's coil number 1. I've put plug wire number 2, and put the intake back. I'll just leave the coil cover off and then take our capture one more time. Back in the car, let's set this up. Start the scope and we start the car. Still have our mess. Feel that screen. And let's analyze this. Interesting. So we have moved our plug wire from 1 to 2, but our funky waveform is remaining down there. So these plugs are fouled up, and that's our issue with that. The other thing I've noticed is those two coils are different. Coil number 1 is aftermarket and coil number 2 is original. I'm not seeing how this could affect that. What I want to do is let's take these plugs out of 2 and 3 and let's swap them with 1 and 4 and then take this capture again. I just want to see, will this pattern remain exactly where it is? If the pattern remains where it is, then this coil has an issue of coil number 2. So let me do that quick. Those are our 4 plugs. Interesting how wet they all look. They all have fuel on them. So this fuel is, something is up with the fuel, the fueling of this car. And they are lined up exactly the same as there. So what I want to do is take 1 and 4 and put it in 2 and 3, and then take 2 and 3 and put it in 1 and 4. When you're doing tests like this, do not change more than one variable at a time. So we've still left our swap plug wires exactly where they were. We've only changed the plugs, and then if we still see the same capture, then we will change the two coils around. So let's go back, take that capture. Back, let's set up our capture one more time. And we start the car. There we go. And let's analyze this again. And there we have it. Look at that. Our funky pattern has moved with the plugs. So at least for this misfire, we are done here. Plugs now 1 and 4 are fouled up. Plugs 2 and 3 are firing fine. I want to see if I can get a good set of plugs, or we clean these up and then we take this from there. But first I want to change those 2 plugs, and I'm also interested to see what these injectors are doing. These plugs are getting fouled up for a reason, and I don't think my timing here is the issue. This engine is starting up very quickly and it's running, but running horribly. I want to see what those injectors are doing, but first, one thing at a time. Let's change out these plugs. So I talked to the owner of the shop, and he went in and got me real quick brand new set of spark plugs. So let's put them in, take our capture again, and then proceed from there. And this is why I like this place. This guy is quick and he is quite keen on what he does. Right, the new plugs are in. Take the capture one more time. Okay, the first thing I've noticed is our misfire is gone. We no longer are misfiring, but we knew that already. It's going to be a spark plug. So let's see how different we are looking. And check that out. Now we are firing all 4 coils. We have good spark from all those 4 coils. So we had bad plugs. But why are these plugs fouling out? That is not a normal condition. So this is not a fix. Something else is wrong with this car. And off the top of my head, the only thing I can think of is I want to look at these injectors, because right now we've been looking at cam, crank, and coils. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the injectors here, Y1, Y2, Y3, Y4, and I'm going to go in order 23, 24, 12, 2, and I'll put them in order: channel 1, 2, 3, and 4 with injector 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then take this capture again, then see what we see. I want to see how those injectors look like, what the waveform pattern is, and then we proceed from there. All I've done is to do what he has done before, saying that when he changes the plugs, it sorts out the car for a short time. But even then, right now it's not running very, very well, but our misfire is gone. So let's go to the injectors. There are our injectors in the order of injectors: 1, 2, 3, 4, channel 1, 2, 3, and 4 respectively. Ready with our scope. Let's start it, and we'll start the car. Take one screen, pause it, put it off. Isn't this the beauty of the scope? You just have to run the car for 10 seconds and you know what your issue is just by looking. Saves me, especially because this exhaust is very pungent. So here are our injectors, and the firing order is 1 3 4 2, and here we see 1 3 4 then 2. Very nice. And let's look at the individual injector patterns. That's 1, that's 3, looks good. 4 looks good. 2 looks good. And just in case you're wondering, I am looking for a couple of things. One, I'm looking for the height here. Make sure that we have a kick, which we do on all. Make sure that we are going fully down or as close to ground as possible, which we are. And make sure that we have our pintle hump, which is in all of them. I don't see anything wrong with these injectors, but just because this thing is running so foul, is our injector timing the same on the engine as it is on the module? That may be a crazy question, but this harness has been rewired. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to pull out this channel and take it in my hand. Then, as the car is running, I'm going to go and probe injector 1, and I want to see this line up with injector 1 down here. Then I'm going to probe injector 2, and I want to see this line up with injector 2 over here. I can't probe injector 3 because it's right under that intake duct. So I will probe injector 4, and I should get exactly this pattern here. If we get a good pattern and everything is kosher, then we have another problem that is causing these plugs to get fouled. It's an easy check, so let's go and do that now. Alright, here I am outside. I've set up and relocated my laptop right there. And here are my injectors. So let me start the car first and then we proceed. Car is running. So let me come and start my scope. First thing I want to do is to change my capture. So I want to come here. I'll do a trigger on channel A and bring it right there. Drop my time base down. That's a good one. So right here I'm seeing all my injectors profile, and that will hold that pattern on A as I pin these injectors on the rail. So I'm going to come here, pick my injector number 4 line, and make sure my other injectors are good, which they are. And we're going to start here. So this is front of the engine, number 1 2 3 4. So we're going to start with number 1 here. Holy crap. Oh, I think we just found our problem. This is not injector number 1. This is wired wrong. So that's number one. Let me just go down the line. But I think we've seen our problem. So we go to injector number 2. And that's number 2. And number 2 is wired on number 3. Unbelievable. I can't get to number 3, which is down there, but I'm going to get to number 4, which is here. So there is number 4. And let's see what we have. And number 4 is wired to number 1. Oh my goodness. This is fantastic. None of these injectors are wired correctly. Oh man. Okay, let me shut this off and then let's discuss this. Wow, this is awesome, amazing. So I'm reviewing this footage and let me just map it down here. So we have injector driver 1 is actually controlling injector number 4. Then we have injector driver number 2 is controlling injector number 3. Then I couldn't get to injector number 3, so injector driver number 4 is controlling injector number 1, which means our driver 3 is controlling injector number 2. This is the firing order of the injectors then, because our firing order is 1, 3, 4, 2. But our actual firing, so normal firing is 1, 3, 4, 2. Our actual firing is 4, 2, 1, 3. This is ridiculous. We are firing our injectors at the wrong time. No wonder these plugs are getting fouled. They're just not getting the fuel at the correct time. This is amazing. What I need to do now is go back to the front of the vehicle and I need to rewire these injectors. I will look under the intake and see if we can change the harness location. If we can't, we have to rewire at the ECU. Alright, the shop is all evacuated just like I like it. Here alone, at the end of the day, we work hard and we get the job done. Day or night, doesn't matter. So I've marked, that was on 1, that was on 2, 3 and 4. So the first thing I'll do is to see if I can reach oh great. Looks like we can reach. Yes we can, apart from this one. 4, is a bit too short. I may need to rewire 4. I don't think I can reach all the way here, but I am interested in seeing if this car will run properly. So for now, I'm just going to yank this so that my 4 can reach to 1. And actually, what I should do is to put it under. This pipe. That's better. 4 goes to 1. Then 2 goes to 3. Okay, then I wonder what this is. And it's a distraction right now. 3 goes to 2. And 1 goes to 4. Sweet. All wired up. So let me quickly just put this back. I won't bother so much with this. I will extend this if this works, which it should, and then that should be done. So let me bring this back. That's it. So let me set up the scope again and we start this engine. Actually, even before we set up the scope, let me just start the engine. I want to see how this is going to run, and then I'm going to put my scope on it, then just check and make sure that all our injectors are now in the right designation. Still running a bit rough. Let me go try and give it some throttle. I can accelerate very well. Looks to me now that we have to set our idle control. Yeah, that's what it is. The idle is a bit too low. We'll play around with that idle control and make sure it gets where it needs to be, but this is wonderful. That's excellent. I like that. It's running well. Maybe that's a fix. So I'm going to give it to the owner of the garage, let him drive around tomorrow and then see how it is after I set this idle a bit, because it's a bit too low. It's supposed to be around there. I'll look up the procedure of doing that if I can find it, and then this should be done. I just want to see whether I got this correct. There's my firing order on the scope. So we're going to go to injector number 1. There's number 1, and we are on number 1. That's good. Then we have here number 2. There we go, and we are on injector number 2 on the scope. It's a bit loose. There we go. That's number 2. I like that. Excellent. And we go to number 4 back here, and we should get our proper injector pattern. There we have it. Oh, I don't have it. There we have it. So I like that. That's a fix, at least for this problem. Let me look up the service procedure for setting up that idle control. Now this engine has been running like this for years, so things are messed up. I'm sure the O2 sensor is fouled up. I just want to look at the O2 and see if we are cycling. And the cylinders are all fouled up with fuel. It'll take some running to get this thing to come up to optimal running condition. But those are other issues. My main thing was to find out why are we fouling our spark plugs, and why don't they last a full service schedule. And now we know that, and this is now good to go. So look up that service procedure. I may not do it in this video because, like I said, WIS is really a pain to get information from, but if I can get it in the next 15 minutes, then I'll show how to reset this idle. If not, this is done, and we'll see you next time.